Dwemer Lore, Part 4. Dwemer Automatons by Guylaine, Nord. The dwarves have been extinct for many an age, and perhaps that's for the best. To see men, women, the size of large children, all with beards, would be a most disturbing sight. Still, whatever wrath the dwarves brought from the gods that consumed their entire civilization surely must have been an awe-inspiring thing to witness. The remnants of their civilization lie buried in the hearts of the mountains. Scholars and thieves the world over descend on the skeletal remains of the dwarven cities like vultures to scrape clean the bones of the past, old knowledge waiting to be exhumed and treasures to be discovered. But many men lie murdered in those halls of the damned, because those dwarven ruins do not release their treasures without a fight. My kin would tell stories long ago, when I was just a child, about how adept the dwarves were at building machines. They would say before our time, dwarves harnessed the power of the earth. They wielded fire and hammers to reshape steel and bronze with mechanical brilliance that breathed life into those now ancient constructs of metal and magic. In the dark halls, their chambers, amid the ceaseless droning of the grinding gears and venting steam, they lie in wait to confound or destroy would-be plunderers of the dwarven sanctums, as the grim watchmen of the last vestiges of culture from a dead race. I descended into the humid darkness of Musvult, the slow hiss of steam creaking on metal and rattle of old gears powering an empty city would unnerve most men. I could hear things in the darkness skittering across the floor just out of sight as I stepped over bodies of plunderers or scholars who had not made it far. I knew it was not rats wandering in these halls. Small mechanical spiders set upon me with rapid movements. Machines sprouted from the walls and uncurled from spheres into contraptions that rolled on top of gears for legs and crossbows for arms. I could not help but marvel at these single-purpose machines built for the murder of men. My sword and my shield are my strength, and I am undeterred by such things. I had heard of greater things roaming these depths, and indeed, something else in these chambers stirred, and it echoed with massive weight. As it lumbered closer, its feet struck the ground as if walking on pistons. As it loomed out of the darkness, I could see it clear for the first time. Axe for one hand, hammer for the other, as tall as 5 men, made of dull bronze with a face molded in the image of its masters. A steam centurion. The stories were true. These were the guardians of the greatest dwarven treasures. We fought, and the dwarves must truly be extinct, because our battle was surely booming enough to wake the dead. It came at me with hammer and axe, inhuman strength, great fortitude, and a purpose of nothing but murder. I dodged as it crushed the stone around me with futile strikes. I thrust and slashed at it with my blade and took every opening afforded as we shook the halls with violence. I refused to be undone by a machine. Where the average man would be long dead, I stood over the husk of this dead automaton, its steam escaping like a final gasp. I could have taken the dwarven artifacts and metal, but I left them there for others, for I would not hex my journey with the possessions of a dead man. Maybe that is where the countless others go wrong. I will continue my journey across the lands. Perhaps one day Guylaine will meet a worthy challenge, for I have yet to see what would make me tremble. Dwemer Inquiries, Volume 1, Their Architecture and Civilization, by Guylaine, Scholar. In the deep halls, far from men, forsaken red mountain twisted kin, hail the mind, hail the stone, dwarven pride, stronger than bone. My life's work has been dedicated to investigating the Dwemer, their dubious history, and their mysterious banishment. My goal with this text is sharing my findings and conclusions based on 80 years spent studying their unique architectural remains. The migration of the Deep Elves from their ancestral Dwemereth, now Morrowind, is generally accepted fact. Recorded history supports this, specifically mentioning the Rokurun's clan refusal to join King Dumak in the formation of the First Council and their subsequent exodus to Hammerfell. The architectural premise is also sound, as the building habits of the dwarves adapted and changed, albeit slowly and in subtle ways, over time and land. I propose that some of these differences are stylistic as well as practical. Traditional viewpoints suggest that the Vvardenfell Dwemer were the most prolific of their kind. Based on my excavations throughout Skyrim, Morrowind, and High Rock, I'm not sure that this is the case. While Vvardenfell is almost cluttered with dwarven ruins poking through the surface of the landscape, the construction of those ruins is fundamentally different from the majority of what I've observed elsewhere. Furthermore, as we delve into Vvardenfell's ruins, we notice that their internal structure is quite different. While major civic and operational chambers are found near the surface in Vvardenfell ruin, that is not typically the case on the mainland. Minor passageways and storehouse rooms are near the surface, but more important locations do not occur until we explore much deeper. Because such major locations are well hidden within Dwemer ruins outside of Morrowind, many scholars believed that they were in fact not present in ruins outside that province. This premature conclusion has led some to believe such sites to be mere outposts. My research has shown that this is not to be the case. A few theories may explain this difference. Perhaps clan architects simply had their own styles and preferences when it came to civic planning. This seems only somewhat likely, as dwarven techniques were based on empirical study, and there was little likely room for creative interpretation when it came to building technique. Geological makeup of the terrain almost certainly played a role, especially in a region like northern Skyrim, where the ground near the surface is very rocky and often frozen, as opposed to the volcanic substratum common in Vvardenfell or the ubiquitous aquifers found in Hammerfell. It's possible that the dwarven architects in the north were not able to excavate larger structures until reaching more pliable strata. This scholar would like to suggest, however, that many structures west of Morrowind were built after First Era 420. When the clan Rokurun left Vvardenfell, it seems evident that several clans broke off to create their own settlements, choosing to live in greater isolation than their eastern brethren. This theory is particularly fascinating because it leads me to believe that the dwarven architects may have developed their own more elaborate methods of hiding their strongholds over time. This opens the distinct possibility that the undisturbed dwarven archaeological sites exist throughout Tamriel, even in the southern areas like Cyrodiil or Black Marsh, where the dwarves are not believed to have ever held a significant presence. Though we should not get carried away on flights of fancy, one could extrapolate this logic to suggest that some dwarven clans were living among us for much longer than previously believed, perhaps well below the disappearance in the War of the Red Mountain, First Era 700. Dwemer Inquiries, Volume 2, Their Architecture and Civilization, by Thelwe Guylaine, Scholar. In the deep halls, far from men, forsaken Red Mountain, twisted kin, hail the mind, hail the stone, dwarven pride, stronger than bone. The limited written record supports the perception that Deep Elves as culturally revering the pursuits of logic and science. This stands in stark contrast to the belief systems of most other Mer cultures. When we imagine a society structured around such a central ideology, it seems reasonable that the prolific scholars, especially in fields such as mathematics, metallurgy, or architecture, would be elevated to social status like that of the clergy in a more mystically inclined culture. The idea is supported by a fragment of Dwemer's text recovered from a colony in Skyrim, Ixand, which I believe to be associated with Clan Rokurun. My translation is as follows. A lengthy and complex Dwemic text follows. Teray's granted cousin Kulek of untranslatable privilege with duties for family home building. Hogan Kultura, tradition to Father Munda Shaper. Some scholars interpret this as evidence of Dwemer worship of Mundus, but I do not agree. My translation of this passage suggests that a respected Dwemer by the name of Kulok was promoted to a civic position, probably as a tonal architect. The latter half of the fragment suggests that Kulok's position required him to build in a specific style. The term Hoegan Kultara has thus far eluded me, but I believe it may be the name of such a style. It's possible there were several styles differing in their construction principles and typical structures. One earmark of what I believe was the prevalent Dwemer style among the northern clans was a feature I call the deep venture. Deep ventures are often made up of one or more expansive natural caverns in which several other structures occur. Structures within the venue may be carved from the stone itself or freely erected upon the cavern floor. The largest and most impressive venues, such as those found in Bethesda, may even feature roads wide enough for 10 large men to walk shoulder to meet shoulder along it. Arcanex are typically smaller structures. Very few have been properly studied before disruption by grave robbers or greedy adventurers. But those few undisturbed sites have contained a surprising collection of magical objects such as soul gems, alchemical concoctions, and magical texts. Some scholars take these as evidence the Dwemer did in fact dabble in the magic arts. Based on what we know of their culture, as well as the fact most arcanics are minor structures compared to the common fixtures, I would suggest that these were centers of study and nothing more. Perhaps the Dwemer established these halls as means to study men and mer, who surely seemed as alien to them as the Dwemer seem to us today. Great animalcultures can be found in many Dwemer strongholds. These were the factories where centurions and various other constructs were built. I have hoped to study these chambers for clues as to the means by which these mysterious automata are given life, but those same guardians make them especially difficult and dangerous as areas to explore. Dwemer Inquiries, Volume 3. In the deep halls, far from men, forsaken red mountain, twisted kin, hail the mind, hail the stone, dwarven pride, stronger than bone. My studies in this text have focused heavily on the fact that the Dwemer archaeological sites west of Vardenfell seem to be built at much greater depth than their counterparts near Red Mountain. I believe there was a specific threshold to which the dwarven excavators would dig before the construction of vital structures began. I've referred to this threshold as the geocline, but I have found that to be redundant within the deep venue of a colony. Still, there is some variation in the actual depth of a deep venue, where the geocline is always the marker of where I reason the city proper begins. Tunnels and chambers at a more shallow depth, while often grand in their architectural style, appear to have served little in the way of a critical civic purpose. Above the geocline, surplus stores of food, warehouse chambers that may have been used in trading with nearby surface settlements, and barracks for the topside patrols are common. These tunnels, I have observed, can meander in seemingly more random patterns than those planted in the structures beneath. I hypothesize that this may be due to the unpredictable nature of any excavation, even to a race as clever as the Dwemer. Surely unexpected deposits of stone or geological events could make the effort difficult. I think that these haphazard tunnels are often the result of a search for a suitable substratum to build within. I have found a smaller number of ruins referencing the geological anomaly or place known as Fal Zalamdin. This is intriguing because the term not only appears to be a few tablet fragments, but also very specifically on ornate metal frames in the deepest reaches of Ulfthand, Ikernthand, and Minskjelft, strongholds of Skyrim. I have yet to decipher the meaning of these elaborate carvings, but consider it highly strange that they occur in the deepest parts of each of these ruins. The most reasonable translation of Fal Zarumdin I have managed to decipher is Blackest Kingdom Reaches, but I cannot imagine what that means. I suspect there may be some pattern I am failing to notice. This creeping doubt has haunted my career in recent years, and I have begun to doubt if I will ever unravel some grand secret of the dwarves in my lifetime, though it lies just under my nose, or under my feet. Guylaine's Dwemer Architecture by Guylaine Merrily. Editor's note. This is Guylaine Merrily's outdated but entertainingly written reference on late Dwemer architecture. Excerpt is from the chapter describing the Second Empire style of the approaches and defenses, and mentioning the common formal convention of the 4 tests. The book also mentions that the Telvanni have adopted these 4 tests convention as an aesthetic element in their defenses and approaches to their towers. The test of pattern requires the observer to examine and analyze for patterns before he acts, with the understanding that many patterns are subtle or hidden. The test of disorder requires the observer to proceed systematically when no pattern is perceived. When the observer recognizes that many things must be done and in no specific order, the procedure is to perceive and order all things to be done, and upon doing the thing recall how and when the thing has been done. For example, the observer must remember the initial position of a thing and also the new position of that thing. The test of evasion requires the observer to examine the obstacle and compare his resources and abilities. If the obstacle is too difficult, seek for a path around the difficulty. The test of confrontation requires the observer to examine the obstacle and compare his resources and abilities. If the obstacle is too difficult, look for a path around the difficulty, but if no path around can be found, confront the obstacle directly. I hope you've been enjoying these lore readings, and if you have, please do consider subscribing to the channel. Thanks for watching.